Good evening. My name is Michael Popa, Executive Director of the Mainstream Coalition, and welcome to a joint candidate forum for Kansas Senate Districts 4, 5, 6, 10, co-sponsored by Baptist Ministers Union, Collaborative Communications, Dot Votes, Kansas City, Kansas Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, KCK NAACP Branch, League of Women Voters, Mainstream Coalition, and Servicing Lips. This evening, we'll hear from 7 of 8 candidates running for Kansas Senate Districts 4, 5, 6, and 10. Please note that invitations were extended to all 8 candidates running for these seats. However, Mike Thompson, District 10, declined to participate. In just a moment, I will introduce our moderator and place the forum guidelines into the Zoom chat. All candidates are aware of and have agreed to these guidelines. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening and closing remarks and 2 minutes to answer each question. A visual indicator of the time remaining for each answer will be displayed in the Zoom chat. If a candidate has not finished answering the question when their time is up, the moderator will politely interject and move to the next candidate. If time allows at the end, we may take questions from the audience. So if you do have a question for any of the candidates, please submit that using the Q&A feature, and all candidates will answer that question. The partner organizations co-sponsoring this forum believe that our democracy works best when citizens are informed and active. So thank you very much for taking the time to learn about your Senate candidates. And please share this with your friends and family. Recordings of this forum will be available on the League's and Mainstream's Facebook and YouTube pages. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight's forum, Mr. Broderick Crawford with NBC Community Development Corp. And Servicing Lips.
Good evening, and thank you, Michael, for that gracious introduction. Again, we will be hearing from 7 of our candidates, and as I call each of their names, they will be each given 1 minute to do an introduction, and after the introductions, we will then go into the questions. So I will start with Senate race. This is absolutely, and one thing to make of note, that this is not a debate. It is an informative candidate forum. So you're speaking to the audience and not to each of the candidates or not to your opposition. Again, invitations were sent to all of the candidates that are running for office. 3 of them declined to participate. All right, so let's get started with the introductions. I'll go with Senate District 4, and I'll ask Sam Stillwell to give his first introduction. 1 minute.
Broderick, that was the wrong candidate list, I believe.
Okay. So Senate District 4, David Haley. One minute.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Thank you, Mike Papa. Thank you, Mainstream. And thank you for the various supporting entities that are making this forum possible. I genuinely appreciate, and that I have not had, and there are very few opportunities to say a little bit about our candidacies and what we do, what we try to do. My name is David Haley. I am candidate once again for the 4th district, which is Wyandotte County, right in the heart of Wyandotte County. And many of the values that have been enshrined by the entities who are sponsoring this are, I think, values that I've taken to heart, and that time and time again, I try to address in the Kansas legislature. I have a 20+ year track record of being progressive and involved, and I'm greatly appreciative that we would have an opportunity to highlight some of the issues involving education and health and criminal justice reform that I think David Haley has done my best to represent during the time that I've been there. Thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to the balance of the evening.
Thank you for your introduction. We'll now go to Senate District 5, and we'll start with Jeff Pittman. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Yeah, I'm Jeff Pittman, Representative Jeff Pittman. I've been a two-term state representative representing Leavenworth, District 41, and I'm now running for State Senate District 5. And I hope to represent Leavenworth, Lansing, Piper, Bonner Spring, and Edwardsville next year in Topeka. I was a hometown leader. I grew up in this area, graduated from Leavenworth High, and I took that public education that we fight for to get a master's degree at MIT and Oxford. And I've been in business for years, helping companies deal with disruption to their supply chain, much like the companies we see out there now struggling in this pandemic. And I realized I got involved in state politics when Governor Braun his tax experiment was wrecking our state's budget. I was part of that bipartisan coalition that helped fund education, that helped keep our credit rating going back up, and really put fiscally responsible policies in place. I believe in the values of the Mainstream Coalition here, and I look forward to this forum, and thank you so much for putting this on.
Thank you so very much, sir. We'll next hear from Kevin Braun.
Thank you, Broderick. I am Senator Kevin Braun, Broderick Crawford, and wanted to, I thank you so much for inviting me to this event. I am served for the last 2 years in the Senate. I'll just give you a little history for myself. I do live in Wyandotte County, and the district, of course, covers Leavenworth, Lansing, Bonner Springs, Edwardsville, and then Kansas City, Kansas, over to 435. My private sector experience is I've been in business for 30 years. I have 32 years of military experience in the Guard and Reserve with 2 deployments overseas in times of war for the great state of Kansas and the Kansas National Guard. Over the last 2 years, we've had incredible successes that would not be possible with an opposition party candidate, because as a member of the majority, I have been able to deliver for Wyandotte County and Leavenworth County. I look forward to working with each one of these organizations and each one of the other members of the party, the opposing party, to bring safety, health, prosperity, and better education to Wyandotte and Leavenworth counties. Thank you, Broderick. Broderick, you're still on mute.
Thank you for your opening, and just for everyone to know, I intend no disrespect, but to level the playing field, I've been asked to introduce each of you, although some of you do hold elective office. I've been asked to introduce you by your first and last name only. So please accept my apology. No respect.
No offense taken. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll have, we go to Senate District 6, Diana Whittington.
Hello, I'm Diana Whittington, and I am candidate for Senate District 6, which is basically like the southern half of Wyandotte County. And I have been a teacher in KCK for 41 years. Taught 5 years in our church's private school, but the rest of the time in Kansas City, Kansas public schools. I'm currently a teacher at Washington High School. I love the community and have lived here for many, many years, even though I was born in closer to Emporia. Got my master's, not my master's, my degree from Emporia, my teacher's degree from there. So I am running because I feel that Wyandotte County needs a choice and a different voice. And so I wanted to represent people maybe whose values haven't been represented before, and to give them a choice. That's what.
Thank you so much for your introduction. We'll now go to Pettey.
Hello. I want to thank you for this opportunity to be on the forum today. I'm Senator Pettey, and I'm running for re-election. I want to thank Mainstream, the League of Women Voters, Dot Votes, and all of your partners for this opportunity to provide citizens with more information. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a retired 36-year public school educator. The thousands of students that I have taught during my career in the Turner School District serve as my motivation to continue to work for quality education, access to healthcare, and support for Kansas families. This district represents a lot of Wyandotte County and a portion of Johnson County as well. Our state is facing a significant economic downturn as a result of the global pandemic. Kansas needs legislators that will work with the governor to ensure economic stability. This relies on protecting our investments in job growth services like education at all levels, affordable child care, and the Eisenhower Legacy Transportation Plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your introduction. We'll next go to Senate District 10 and Lindsey Constance.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here. I am running for Kansas Senate District 10, which is considered one of the most competitive legislative flips in Kansas. I currently serve on the Shawnee City Council, where I was elected in 2017. I have championed sustainability and energy efficiency initiatives. I voted in support of a non-discrimination ordinance, and I have supported our strategic visioning process to create a plan for our future. I'm married with 2 children who, along with the students I teach, really serve as my main motivators for running. I actually just started my 17th year of teaching and am currently in the Shawnee Mission School District, where I graduated and my own children attend school. I'm committed to facing problems head on, using science and data to guide my decision making. One example of this collaborative approach has been my work as president and co-founder of Climate Action KC. I'm going to use that same approach at a state level. I will fight for common sense policies. I will build bipartisan coalitions and solve problems to make people's lives better. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey. And thank you all of the candidates who are here with us tonight. We greatly appreciate you taking your time out to talk to our audience that we have viewing this forum tonight. Next, we'll go into our questions, and I'll ask each of you the same question, and you will each have 2 minutes to respond to the question. So question number 1, and I'm going to start with you, Lindsey. KCTV5 News reports that over 25,000 Kansans have not received unemployment benefits during the pandemic because of problems that plague the Kansas Department of Labor relating to distribution of funds. What are you willing to do to resolve this matters?
Thank you. You know, this is something that I have heard a lot from voters as I'm talking to them on the phone, a lot of concerns about unemployment and the challenges accessing funding and getting calls back. I know that our Kansas employees are working very hard in that department. However, it's definitely been a challenge. I think we need to make sure that we are adequately funding these departments, and having a balanced tax approach will certainly help. I think all of our Kansas departments are really struggling post the Braun back tax experiment, and we need to get back to more of a balanced approach so that we can properly fund our Kansas government, because this is a time where people really need that support. I think another approach is to make sure that we are accepting federal dollars. My opponent has said that he is discouraging the federal government from giving Kansas millions of dollars for COVID relief funding. I think it's important that we do allow those dollars to come into our state so that we can deal with the health aspects as well as the economic aspects of COVID-19 and help us get back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsey, for your response. I now go to Diana Whittington. Same question.
So like Lindsey, I have heard lots of people sharing the struggle and the frustration because the unemployment benefits didn't come when they needed them, and it's really put a really hardship on a lot of people. I think that one of the first things we need to do is to streamline the whole process. I know some of the people I spoke with, they said that just the way that they had to fill out the information to apply for it, and then not knowing, the waiting game. And so there needs to be a way to be more in touch with the people who are applying for those benefits and letting them know where they're at in the process. That's it.
Thank you, Diana. And as a reminder, candidates, please turn off your videos when you're not speaking. Next person to respond to question 1 is Pettey.
Sorry, I was having a hard time getting the video to come on.
We're all used to trying to find the mute and unmute button. That's something for all of us.
It was more like the video and the mute button. You know, I think we always have to keep in mind that this is such an unusual situation because we had hundreds of thousands of people applying for unemployment in Kansas, just like every other state. But it did point out quickly those things that we have underfunded due to the Brown-backed tax experiment. And that was one thing, technology. So I know that we do need to invest in our technology and to continue to work on improving the system. The other thing I think that's real important that it brought forward is that we do have legislation in place that does lock people out for 3 years if there appears to be any kind of an assumed type of fraud with unemployment. And many people were very surprised about that when they came up on applying for unemployment. I think the process can work. It's just when you overload a system, it does make it very difficult. So I think we need to definitely change that one piece of legislation concerning lockout, because we're the only state in the country that has that long of a lockout of 3 years. The other piece is that we now have a system that is allowing self-employed as well as employed to receive unemployment, and that actually put another burden on the system as well. I do think that the governor has worked really hard to help the system to work and change the Secretary of Labor and made that change to help expedite the sending out of unemployment checks. But it definitely will be something that we'll be addressing in the legislative session.
Thank you so much. The same question, Jeff Pittman, talk to us about question 1.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, it's very tough. I mean, let's face it, we have constituents that were coming to me early in March, April, May, and I helped, we had to shift gears as representatives, as legislators, and really help these people. And that's what I did, helping them navigate a system that they're not used to. Most folks aren't used to going on to unemployment, and the pandemic affected so many more people that they didn't understand the system. The system itself had anywhere from 200,000 to 1 million calls at a time. And I heard about these. I'm on the Joint Technology Committee on Information Technology, and obviously they kept informed on what was happening with the system in the Department of Labor, as well as the Information Technology Executive Council. And it's dead set. They were on a path to upgrade the systems coming out of those Brown-back era tax experiments that that my opponent ran on back in 2016. Those don't work. We need to upgrade our architecture, and I support that. We're going to hire a new chief of IT architecture in the state, and that person is going to look across. We're doing an inventory of our systems, kind of coming up with different strategies across different systems to come up with a more flexible way of both paying for and maintaining the technology we have. And it's been waiting. I helped introduce the Cybersecurity Act that helps keep our systems secure, but it's only a start. We need to do more, because what I heard in our last briefing was that 20 to 30% of the application these days are indicative of fraud, and we need to watch our taxpayers' money. I do support the federal government coming in and helping us get through this time in terms of a system upgrade, and I've encouraged the Secretary of Administration as well as the Department of Labor Secretary to take advantage of those funds and put some of those into system upgrades. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your response. We now go to Kevin Braun.
Thank you so much, Broderick. And I will say I've got to respond because I thought we weren't going to do this on this, but it is important that I was not in office in 2016. My opponent actually was. He's missed 28 days of work and 19 critical votes. So if that's what you want, working on your tax plan or your unemployment plan, then I guess he's your candidate. But I will not do that again as long as we all follow the rules here and follow the forum as it was set up. So for me, The unemployment crisis in our state has been alarming. Senate colleagues and I were applying a lot of pressure every day to the Department of Labor. Now, I'm going to say something that may not be popular on the conservative side, but the truth is the governor's got a really hard job. I confirmed Delia Garcia and over 50 of the other, there's only 3 conferees that I did not confirm. Delia Garcia did a good job. She just was not geared for that, right? So she was a good person, but it was a really tough job at the time. And so we need to make sure that we're working to expedite. I'm also on joint information technology, and I asked some really pointed questions about when are we going to clear up the 20,000 people that are waiting. And I believe, and I have confidence in the people that have gone into that portion of the administration and are working on those issues. But you're never going to change a situation unless you get people back to work. So for me, I know it's time to get the restrictions straight, get the safety straight, and get people back to work. We need to make sure that those people that were eligible get their funding retroactively. But thank God the unemployment rate is down in the 7% range, and we're headed in a positive direction. And I look forward to helping the governor and any of my colleagues in Wyandotte County or Leavenworth County to make us a more prosperous area and make sure that we get back to work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your response. And I will take the opportunity to remind all of our candidates, this is an information forum, not a debate. The questions that have been posed by the group of sponsors are intended for your response and not what your opponent did or didn't do. That's not what the community is asking for tonight. We want to know what you will do and not what your opponent has or has not done. Thank you for your respect for the groups that have put this forum together. David Haley, question 1.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I appreciate the admonition that you just gave, Roderick Crawford. It is important to appreciate, though, that though we are individuals who are running for a particular office, David Haley's running for the state Senate, that we need to have allies who share philosophically some of the various points of government and the issues that come up. I can't do it by myself, and it's not even partisan, it's philosophical. And so when we look at unemployment insurance, it's important to understand that where I have been very supportive of not seeing a lockout for someone who may have been alleged to have been fraudulent in some previous award due to unemployment, that there are some who are saying that there would be that lockout. And some of them are running for office and happen to be on this particular discussion. I can't do it alone. And to say that the department, which was overwhelmed and which I've gotten innumerable calls and am still trying to resolve for those who have been locked out or who have lost their job due to this new pandemic, if we don't have the right people philosophically and the organizations who are so good as to support this, and those who support the organizations don't understand that it's not about any one senator or legislator, but to have a block that will help people connect to their unemployment awards and not lock them out, that it's important to continue to elect people that believe that we should be supportive of those who are in difficult times and not to categorize them as not doing everything that they can to be a part of that, of the mainstream, if you'll pardon the analogy of our society, then our efforts will be lost. So I am very glad that we did have a department that was overwhelmed, but has tried and continues to strive to connect people to those awards. Many other states, and we weren't, Kansas was not the worst, regrettably, or gladly that we weren't the worst, but there are others who too have suffered during this pandemic and trying to connect people with their awards.
Thank you so much. That is time. All right, we'll now go to question number 2. Question number 2 is this. Broadband development is vital to improving reliable access to telemedicine, to education and educational opportunities, and economic development. How would you encourage and aid in the development of reliable broadband in both rural areas, and in all parts of Wyandotte County. David Haley, we'll start with you answering question number 2.
I've been pleased, thank you again, Broderick. I've been pleased to be a part of several initiatives that have been debated over the last few years about broadband connectivity, not just in urban areas. And I have probably the most densely urban district of the 40 Senate districts in our state, but also in rural areas where we do want to encourage all parts of Kansas to have the access to high-speed broadband. During this particular time, again, we see where it's to the societal detriment now of the learning opportunities for our children and for many of us to be connected even to our employment and or even as much as our church. Some of us are going to church online now. So high-speed broadband is an issue that I've been previously pleased to support when those initiatives come before it. I'm at this point, the only attorney left in the Senate. The 2 that we have will be segueing out. But tech has not been my high point, but wherever I have the opportunity to see that there's a higher speed, more accessible broadband for our general society, I've been very supportive.
Thank you, sir.
I'll yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, sir. Kevin Braun, tell us about broadband in rural and urban areas.
Thank you so much, Broderick. So this is not, when we look at this issue, it isn't as much of an issue as David had referenced in the urban areas, although there are some urban areas that still have challenges. And I think what we need to do with that is we need to work with our communities. We've worked on a couple bills where there were just general communication bills where there's challenges where the city or the county wants to charge certain fees, and it sometimes discourages businesses, competitive businesses, from coming in and saying, I want to bid this because the business is worth having. And so I think we want to encourage the free market in some of these places to make sure that cities and counties, League of Municipalities, we respect everybody, but we want to make sure that there's more than one option. In some of these communities, they end up with just one option. And when you do that, when you end up with a monopoly on that and you don't allow others to bid, it is a challenge, because what happens is the end consumer gets a much higher price. So I'd like to see a competitive market. Now, the areas that this really hits, and we've noticed this under the COVID crisis, because it affects your employment. So those who have the ability to have access have been able to maintain their jobs somewhat, even if it's at a lower level, to be able to have access and to be able to communicate and do their jobs. We need to set our state up so that we draw a lot more business. And the way we do that is we have the infrastructure. And this is an infrastructure project. We also have seen it in education, where it is extremely important. If we want some equity in education, or we want equity in education, we have to be able to have each child be able to access that. In the rural areas, so in our last section, we'll talk about the rural areas. I really believe the model that was used when we put electricity across the great state of Kansas with the rural electrical cooperatives, where it isn't a profit motive, where it is more of a situation where we do want to have people that are extended, where it isn't profitable to have electricity to one home out in the middle of nowhere. But I do believe that is the model. So working with those electrical cooperatives to move that forward and have them do that piece gets you both your inner city and your rural areas covered with quality.
I'm gonna have to stop you on that note. Thank you for your response. We now go to Jeff Pittman. Tell us about your thoughts, broadband, rural and urban areas, education, schools,
Absolutely.
etc.
Yeah, it's been brought up. This pandemic has introduced a new concept. We need to adapt. We need to adapt to the change. We see it in our lives daily. You see it in your life. I've got kids out there and they're learning online with hybrid approaches. Some are in school and some are completely remote. And we see the issues that lack of broadband has in that model. When I first got into office, I had been advocating that we're going to have to look at broadband as a key component of how we continue to move forward with our education system in Western Kansas. if we're going to ask these kids to be remote, we need to provide them, and we do on some of the schools, but into their homes, a better throughput and more quality of information flow. And in the inner cities, they face similar issues. I have families right here who don't have good access to broadband and solid internet, and their kids are suffering from it during this pandemic. We need to look at solutions there. I was one to work with Spectrum and help them bring into our neighborhoods a program for low-income families that actually gave a substantial discount to homes that qualified for it economically. That's great, but there's also federal money sitting there that we need to monitor. It's coming into Kansas to help with broadband. There is a broadband task force out there that's looking at this, but we need to make sure that our citizens have a voice in that, and it's not just big corporations that are looking at that. We need to make sure it's meeting the needs of the people so that we can be competitive as an industry, bring businesses in, as well as our kids take advantage of the online education aspects of that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your response. We'll now go to our District 6 candidates. I'm going to start with Pat on this question.
Thank you. You know, there's been some important points that have been touched on, but I do think it's really important for us to realize that this pandemic has just really brought home the fact that access is so important, and it's really not just a rural issue, it's an urban issue as well. And it's certainly in District 6, there are many families that are low income that have you know, just can't afford it within their budget. So hotspots, I think it's one of the things we need to continue to work with is with our broadband companies. Not only are they providing hotspots, but we need to, as was mentioned earlier, we need to work on ways to have less costly access. With the fact that so many families and children and people are working from home, it really brings home the fact that we need to have not only access, but quality access. Because if you have 3 or 4 people working in the same household and trying to have access all day long, that's not going to work. I would say that our Eisenhower transportation plan does include being able to use our right-of-way on our state highways for fiber optics, and that is going to be part of as we look at improvement and expansions. There also is now, we have a $40 million new CARE grant that will provide support for grants for access to the internet. So that's available now, but of course that will have to be used by by 2021. So it is an issue that we need to address, but it also is showing the big divide between the haves and the have-nots.
You're on mute, Broderick. Broderick, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I apologize. So I'll put a note for where I live in the urban area. It's a lot of noise down here, so I'm trying to mute myself so I'm not interrupting the responses from our very valuable and well-learned candidates. So Diana, tell us about broadband education and economic development.
Well, I am going to have to start by agreeing with Pat concerning how it affects education. And I am teaching online right now, and I can't tell you how many messages, emails, phone calls I get every day from kids or parents where they can't get on because their internet, fell off or they're having problems. And a lot of that is because, like Pat said, if you have 2, 3, 4 kids in a family and they're all on one internet system that is not of high quality or quick enough, then it's just not enough. And so I know our school district is providing little hotspots, and I'm not sure if where those came from, but even those are not enough. And so it's I think in order for us to be global citizens and to be competitive in our world, we really have to invest in a high quality broadband system. And then I have to agree with Kevin and what he was saying about how businesses depend upon it. And we are going to be able to draw many more small businesses and large businesses if we have that infrastructure of a good broadband system. And then also in the rural areas, I grew up on a farm. And so we never had cable growing up. We never had anything like that because it just, I don't even think it's still out there. But people are going to be more likely to move into our county and into our communities if we can offer a good broadband system. So that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana, for your response. And Lindsey, Constance, you'll have the final word on broadband for this evening.
All right, thank you. As other candidates have shared, it is absolutely important in lots of issues. I'm a classroom teacher by day, and it's definitely opening our eyes to the inequity. Even here in Johnson County, we have at-risk students who don't have access. We have some of our English language learners who are struggling to get access, and it's definitely a problem as we move through these different phases of the way we're teaching students. So it's critical that families have access, and I'm really happy to hear about those CARES funding, or the CARES funding being able to go towards hotspots. I think that's a great solution in a really difficult time. Workers obviously need it in order to work during this time as well, and also, you know, for accessing healthcare. Some of our rural communities don't have access to doctors and clinics, so telehealth provides a really great opportunity that people can still get the care they need and can still consult with a physician. So certainly it's critical. Some of the things that I have been able to be supportive of on my time on the Shawnee City Council have been through my work with the National League of Cities Federal Advocacy Committee. I serve on 2 committees with the NLC, and we have really worked with our federal delegation to make this a priority, make infrastructure and broadband a priority. It's been something, one of the top issues that we have spoken with them about when we have reached out and spoken with them, and it's something that I will continue to lobby for as a state senator. I've also been actively involved in regional transportation planning through my work on Climate Action KC, and was really pleased to see that broadband was a part of the consideration with the Eisenhower Transportation Plan as well. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. And now we'll go to question number 3. And we'll start with you with question number 3, Lindsey. All right, here it is. Healthcare is always important, but much more so during this pandemic. Wyandotte County in 2019 health rankings report showed that 17% of adults under age 65 are uninsured, and that 25% of our children under age of 18 are living in poverty. These numbers have no doubt worsened with the pandemic. What would you support expanding the Kansas Medicaid program in order to get coverage for these people in Wyandotte County and the 150,000 plus Kansans who lack health care coverage? Why or why not? And if you do support Medicaid expansion, how do you propose to get this legislation through to the governor's desk?
Great. Well, great question. This is absolutely critical. And right now, as we are in the midst of a public health crisis, we absolutely must expand Medicaid. Not only will this provide over 150,000 Kansans with access to health care, as you mentioned, it will help keep hospitals open. A third of our rural hospitals are currently financially vulnerable, and it will help ensure their doors remain open. It will also maintain and create 13,000 critical jobs. And this is something that's been brought up quite a bit during this this forum is the importance of good paying jobs. And that is something that expanding Medicaid would help with as well. We have got to keep our tax dollars here in Kansas. So far, we have turned away $4 billion from the federal government. This is one of those common sense issues that Kansans agree on. The majority of Kansans support this. And so I really think that there is the political will of the people to get this passed. And it is certainly evident now in the midst of the COVID crisis. I think that political will continue putting that pressure on certain members of the legislature who have not supported it up until now. I do want to just share that in addition to expanding Medicaid, I support quality mental health services. That's an issue I hear a lot about with families. People with mental health challenges are struggling even more right now during the COVID crisis. Make sure that we're protecting people with pre-existing conditions and providing vital services for aging Kansans. So I am hopeful that we can get this passed. It's going to be my day one priority, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to get this done in January.
Awesome, thank you. Diana Whittington, talk to us about Medicaid expansion in our uninsured Kansas, particularly those here in Wyandotte County.
Yes, I know there are many. I have family members who are uninsured, and it's a real struggle. But one thing that I'm concerned about is that I would not want Medicaid expansion to take away anything from our elderly, our disabled, our pregnant women, and our children. And so I guess I need to understand if they're all thrown into a pot, and if that then pushes them to the back, or if we have able-bodied young people who could work but just are choosing not to, or could purchase insurance. I know a lot of times young people, their priorities are different, and they don't think they need health insurance because they think they're gonna live forever. And so I think education will go a long ways towards that. And also, I think we need some competition in our insurance, and that young, healthy people shouldn't have to have plans that cover a myriad of things. They need plans like maybe just major medical in case they, fall while they're running or something. So it's, I just think we need some more competition in our insurance. I think we need to make sure that we are taking care of those most vulnerable first, and looking at the budget and seeing what we can do. But I am for lowering healthcare costs above all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Pat Pettey, talk to us about Medicaid expansion, uninsured Kansas, and uninsured folks in Wyandotte County.
Absolutely. Well, Medicaid expansion, I am a strong supporter of Medicaid expansion. I've been working for this for the last 5 years. And, I think we always need to remember that for every dollar that's brought into Kansas, then we're getting, every dollar that we spend, we're getting $9 back. And we've passed on over $4 billion of federal money that would have been, could have come in to help Kansans with healthcare. That's $1.8 million a day that we're not bringing here to Kansas. Medicaid expansion is good for business because employees will have access to healthcare, and healthy employees are better employees. It also is good for families, and it's good for job growth. The healthcare industry across the state will be able to employ more and keep their doors open. As was mentioned earlier, it could bring up to 13,000 new jobs, healthcare jobs, as well as keep our hospitals open. When we talk about in Wyandotte County, we know that we rank the lowest in the state when it comes to overall healthcare, or next to the lowest, I'm sorry, in the state. And part of that is our children. We have, across the state of Kansas, we have 103 children who live in poverty and below. And we need to help those families to not only be able to provide childcare, but healthcare as well for those children. It was mentioned earlier about who would this take money from the more vulnerable. Remember, we're talking about the working poor, helping them to be able to have access to insurance. And it does not impact seniors. It doesn't impact those with disabilities. This is the working poor that would have access to Medicaid expansion. So it's a job driver, it's a health promoter, and when we talk about the cost for the state, last year the Hospital Association was willing to step in and help pay for half of that cost that would have been impacted by the state. So there's really no excuse, and I think the pandemic has brought this even more clearly to everyone.
All right, thank you so much for your response. Now we'll go to Jeff Pittman. Talk to us about Medicaid expansion, please, sir.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. I've been an avid supporter of this. That's one of the reasons I got into the legislature, and I voted for this many times. We had a chance to expand Medicaid, and we came very close, but there was a block in the Senate that was, it was very close, and we just couldn't. That's kind of why we need a change there, without talking about anybody individual. And I mean that wholeheartedly. We just need a change of heart there, because we have a financial situation and an ethical decision to make here in Kansas. 2/3 of the states out there have expanded Medicaid. It's not going away. There's, we talk about folks that have disabilities, and there is a line that we need to fix. But we can do that independently of expanding Medicaid. It's a different program. It's a different pool of money. It's a different process. And what we found is there's a study out there by the University of Kansas that those states that expanded Medicaid actually have those with disabilities as a greater part of the workforce. That's actually helping those with disabilities get back to work. It shows the importance of having that coverage. The number's about 150,000 that would affect here in Kansas, but I think it's higher now that we've had the pandemic and so many more people go on unemployment, and that's a large number of those are here in Wyandotte. We've seen it with our schools. We've seen it with our mental health institutions. We've seen the impact it has on the current health crisis has had on hospitals, especially one here in Leavenworth. Would Medicaid expansion have stopped it from closing up here, Cushing, part of St. Luke's? Not necessarily, but they say it sure would have slowed it and helped us get through this pandemic. It's an investment. It's a financial investment in those who work. It's not about people choosing not to work. It's not some kind of a welfare program. It is literally getting people healthy so that they can work and have a healthier workforce out there. So I'm full support of it. And we should also do more to make sure we're protecting those and keep protecting those who have pre-existing conditions. And I hope that we can move forward with this. A way we can do this is to vote.
I'm sorry, that is time, sir.
Support this.
Okay, let's see. Kevin Braun, talk to us about Medicaid expansion, our uninsured folks in Wyandotte County, our uninsured adults and our uninsured children. What can we do about that?
Thank you so much, Broderick. And I'll tell you, I engage this issue. This is a really important issue. And I, for one, am going to make sure that as we go forward, when I go forward with my plan, my number one priority is protect the promises that we've already made. And that's a promise to the elderly, the promise to the disabled, the promise to pregnant women, the promise to children, right? That fall in that level. What I want to make sure we don't do is we saw this with the unemployment situation where it got overloaded and we did horrible services. Right now we have 5,000 disabled Kansans that are not getting the services they need. We're not even handling that correctly. So I want to make sure that we do things better going forward. I'm a person with 22 years of experience in healthcare, and I've gone to all those Western Kansas hospitals. This would not keep those hospitals open. It's not going to keep Cushing open. There would be some money that comes in, but they run like any other business. We're doing telemedicine now. Actually, telemedicine is going to mean less money for them, but that's okay if it creates a better healthcare situation with KU and other places supporting that. So I think that's important. I have a brother that never walked or talked or fed himself. I've got a father that's in a nursing home. I got a mother that passed away while I was in Iraq. I'm not putting them in line in back of healthy people. But what I want to do for healthy people, I went on the mental health tour all over Kansas, is I did more than anyone. I brought Senate Bill 363 that allowed us to have our federally qualified health clinics. I tried to double the amount. I was on Ways and Means. I brought a bill to double the amount to $15 million on that. The result of that was, now they told me in Ways and Means, hey, you can't just double the amount. I would have been glad if any of my peers had joined on there. And if they want to next year, I'm going to fight until I double that amount for Mercy and Truth in Kansas City and St. Vincent's Clinic in Leavenworth. We ended up with $2 million more in the budget. I've done more on this issue than anyone on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate your responses. All right, David Haley, you have the last word on Medicaid expansion, our uninsured Kansas, and what can be done about it.
Well, that's a very heavy title, because I think much has been said. When you back cleanup, I guess, after so many fine answers, it's very difficult to add anything to it. But let me be clear. It would be inappropriate for anyone to attempt to represent Wyandotte County and not be supportive of the expansion of Medicare. I could say that 3 or 4 times. We can hear different offers or bells and whistles from other candidates about alternatives, but the number of uninsured Wyandotte Countyans who are not able to access for fear of the costs that would be incurred. And we can say some of them are able-bodied or healthy, but this becomes a social-economic issue, access to care does. And we should not have one, if you will, class of people, those who have access to private insurance or who have full insurance coverage. And during this time, especially during the pandemic, when we have people walking out of the best hospitals in the world and declaring, I'm completely healed, I'm fine, everything's good, there's no problem with getting sick, you'll get over it. These people who are delusional, and it trickles all the way down, don't understand that the rank and file people who can't access because they can't afford the copay, who need to have access to care, and that enhancing that Medicare, as was said, is not going to bankrupt the state. Every state that has it wants to ensure that they continue to keep it. We need to ensure that people, and that's one of the driving reasons that I'm running again. I wish that my opponent were on tonight, because he does fully understand that access to care is so tantamount, having worked with a child who had a disability as he did. And he understands that. I wish he were here to say that in the 4th Senate District, whether it's David Haley or him, that we would have support for Medicaid expansion in the Senate this upcoming year. For the benefit
Thank
of
you so much. That ends your time for this particular question. We will now move to, and we're making good progress tonight, candidates. So question number 4, and we'll start with you, David, with question number 4. Kansas is one of only 13 states that still imposes a sales tax on groceries. In fact, our food tax of 6.5% is second only to the state of Mississippi. This regressive tax disproportionately hurts the pocketbooks of low-income folks and has an outsized impact on residents of Wyandotte County. Would you support candidates eliminating the sales tax on food? And are you willing to introduce legislation to eliminate the sales tax on food? Please respond.
I have supported, there have been various initiatives over many years in the Senate that would eliminate, and as we look at the budgets that come back and the line items that have been there that would reduce the sales tax on food, it is the most regressive of all taxes. But you have to understand the backdrop, really, of where we are, Roger. We actually had a colleague from Johnson County who said that reducing the sales tax on food, that people already had a problem with obesity. I kid you not, he's no longer there. But the mentality is, again, what we're talking about, the mentality. Regressive taxes seem to be the favorite of ultra conservatives in our legislature. And the tax on food is probably the most regressive that we have. Now, would I introduce now or be a part of it? I am concerned with what our budget is going to look at in these new years. You know, we're hopefully a post-pandemic. It may still be a pandemic-related budget, though our revenue was up last month. Surprisingly, it did come up in the Kansas, in our Kansas economy. We now will have to look at stair-stepping it down, going from the all-time high next to Mississippi, the all-time high in the country, to stair-stepping it down instead of just eliminating it altogether. But I have been historically always supportive. It disproportionately impacts the constituency that I serve all across the board, and we should, in fact, roll it back, if not by half, then further still.
Thank you so much for your response. Kevin Braun, tell us how you feel about this grocery tax, sir.
Thank you so much, Broderick. I will answer yes to both of your questions. So I will absolutely support the elimination of the sales tax on food, on standard food from grocery stores and those kind of things, not high dollar dining establishments where it's prepared, but absolutely. Not only that, but I already voted for it. So in a bill that we had last year, we had sent the governor a bill that was balanced between reducing the tax reductions that happened at a federal level, allowing people to itemize. We had done a bill, and that bill was vetoed. But after that, we came back with another bill that was smaller. But one of the things it did is it allowed the sales tax on food to be reduced on an annual basis as the internet taxing income went up. It's a great model. So I understand my peers maybe looking at the budget and saying, how do we do this? It's a one-for-one model. For every penny that the sales tax goes up on internet taxing, on things like Amazon and the other purchases you make that way, then the following year, you reset your taxes on food until you get to zero. It's a good model. It may take a little while. It's not overnight. I would rather it were overnight, but that's a good model. And I completely agree that it's a regressive tax. We have $36 million in food stamps in Wyandotte County. When you look at that and say, hey, we're gonna do these food stamps, you know that you've got a significant amount of taxes that are based within that it affects the community that needs it most. So I would actually introduce that. I would welcome working with all of my peers on this call and my peers in the Senate to work across the aisle and come up with a solution for that in the long term gets our food tax to zero. Thank you, Broderick.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Jeff Pittman, our stats say that we're second only to Mississippi on this particular issue. Is that where Kansas needs to be?
No, it isn't. It's criminal. And more than anyone on this call, I voted in the House over and over again on amendments to actually reduce the sales tax on food and groceries. Over and over again. The bill wouldn't be, it would by itself, the leadership wouldn't let it get out of the House or Senate. But to entice certain folks, it was put on a bill that was crafted to give multinational corporations big tax breaks, and then this was used to sweeten it up for votes. And it wasn't the way to go. I helped craft that with Representative Croft and some others, that balancing out of the sales tax because they wanted some assistance on that. But we should just do it, and I've supported it over and over again. I've also gone out of the way to help with these farmers markets, which offer alternatives to actually exempt those from sales tax on food and other products, especially those coming from Kansas farmers. It is a regressive tax. And there was another, I have had to vote against it on occasion because it's always some kind of other alternative. It's a devil's choice, as they say. Raise the proposition 2 years ago was to raise the fees on working families like tow truck drivers and hair salons and make sales tax on those services in order to reduce the food sales tax. And that's not something I'm willing to do to our small business people either. So we can do this. We have one of the highest, even if we took a modest reduction and then put critical items on an exemption list, we would be doing a huge service for our citizens here in Wyandotte County.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your response. Pettey, talk to us about the grocery tax.
Yeah, it's always as was mentioned, it's a sticky issue. It's definitely the one that if you asked all of the legislators, I think every one of them would say they would like to see it reduced. The problem is we have to think about how did it come about? And it came about as part of a shift from having, when under the Brownback administration, wanting to have less income tax. And so it shifted to sales tax, because that, even though it's regressive, it seems like people think, oh, it's just a penny more. Oh no, it's another penny more. And once that kind of tax is in place, it's hard to change it. And as my colleague, Representative Braun mentioned, our Representative Pittman mentioned, was that it's often tied to something else. I do support reduction in food sales tax, but it's again, we have to look at our budget. We are seeing the first quarter projections of the state, they are up, and that's good, but we've got an economy that's been overtaxed by the pandemic, and we have to look at that. So I have to say, I would be very cautious about reducing the sales tax, and it would have to go incrementally.
All right, thank you so much for your response. Diana Whittington, talk to us about grocery tax.
Okay, hi. It's probably going to be short and sweet because I think our taxes in Wyandotte County are much too high across the board. And so I am for reducing or eliminating the grocery tax. One thing I think that it would do is that I know from experience, I did live in the inner city in KCMO for a while, and I had a neighbor who didn't have a car. And whenever she had a chance, she would have me drive her to Johnson County to shop for groceries because the prices were much less in Johnson County. And I don't know how much of that's taxes or how much they inflate the prices in the inner city or in town. But I think what would happen is I do think there are a lot of people who, if we have a higher tax, they go to other places to shop. And so if we could, I know when they have that tax-free and just that sales tax-free weekend for schools, a lot of people go to Missouri for that, when that's sales tax, where they buy the school supplies and the computers and things like that. And it's a really big deal. So I would like to keep our business in Wyandotte County. And I think one way we can do that is by reducing that grocery tax.
Thank you so much for your response.
Thank you.
Constance, you have the final word on the grocery food tax.
With the final word, I would like to say I'm really encouraged by the amount of bipartisan support I'm hearing, even just from this panel. And I think that's a great starting point for Republicans and Democrats to come together. It's something that does have that support. So like others on this call, I am in support of reducing that sales tax on food. I do think, though, that we need to do it in a way that balances with our overall approach to taxes. I support a responsible and balanced tax policy approach in Kansas. I'd like to get us back to that three-legged stool approach with both property, income, and sales. I think part of our challenge right now is that, as Senator Pettey mentioned, income tax has been reduced, and then people are feeling that burden from sales and property being too high. As a city council member in Shawnee, I know property taxes are a big concern of my constituents. It's why I haven't voted to increase our mill levy, and it's something that people are really struggling with. So I think if we can get to that balanced approach, and then also look at ways that we can really reinvigorate the Kansas economy through renewables and bioscience, make sure we continue investing in our infrastructure, I think that will bring jobs and will bring that revenue we're going to need to get through this really difficult time with COVID, and be able to address some of the issues like a grocery sales tax that is absolutely regressive. And again, I'm really pleased to see that this does have such wide support, and it feels like a great starting point for us to make some good progress on that issue.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Candidates, this question will be the final question for the evening. I want to personally thank each of you for your responses to each of the questions and how you have kept it informative and not a debate. That's really appreciative. And maybe we should send some of these lessons to Washington, but I'm not going to go there tonight. So the next question is, the Kansas State prison population has been increasing every year, and between 2013 and 2017, the number of people in Kansas State prisons for nonviolent drug offenses increased by 54%. In 2017, our neighbor to the south, Oklahoma, defelonized all simple drug possession charges, leading to positive results for the state. Would you consider such an effort for Kansas? Lindsey, we will start with you.
Thank you. I do support reducing sentences for nonviolent drug possession. I know that drug offenses are a major contributor to the prison population. Reducing harsh sentences for nonviolent drug possession could result in $142 million savings from some of the reports I've read. So to me, that's common sense. And we really need to be looking at how we are helping people overcome addiction in ways that is helpful and productive. I think the key to that is good paying jobs and access to education and access to healthcare. Many people turn to substances when they're struggling with mental health. So if we can make sure that people have healthcare and that they have access to those mental health services, I'd like to see that proactive approach as opposed to the punitive approach of putting them into prison and then, having Kansas foot the bill for that. Another piece of reform that I would like to see explored is just expanding the use of diversion. So providing, again, treatment, services, community service rather than having a sentence, allowing people to continue working and providing for their families and contributing to the community. Not only would that cut government spending, but it would also allow people who are struggling with drug addiction to continue to contribute to their families and their local economies. So I think this is another common sense issue that both Republicans and Democrats often see eye to eye on, and I would really like to look at some of those reforms that we could get enacted. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. Diana, you are up next regarding the prison population.
Well, I do agree with Lindsey on that. On every aspect of that, I do feel that we have the increase is crazy that we would have that much of an increase, especially for nonviolent drug possession. And I'm looking at the notes I wrote here. I think it's really a problem in the fact that it takes fathers a lot of times or family members out of the home, and it puts a burden, an economic burden, a psychological burden. It puts such a burden on families if they are put in prison for these nonviolent drug possession charges, and so, or convictions, I should say. And so I'm all for reducing that. And also, I think we need to look at other ways of helping people who have addictions. And I agree that a lot of that is because of psychological issues. And so we need to really look at providing psychological counseling for people that need it. So I agree with her completely on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Diana, Pettey, talk to us about our prison population.
Well, our prison population definitely needs to be decreased, and interesting that this would be a subject you would bring up because our sentencing commission, and I'm sure that Senator Haley will talk about this even more detail. They've recommended that we, that we do change our guidelines for nonviolent drug possessions. This legislation has been brought forward. It hasn't made it through both sides of the House and the Senate. So it is an issue that we need to address. I mean, we did address juvenile justice several years ago. I serve on the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee, and one of the important things about that was looking for ways to address the needs of juveniles without putting them into incarceration, and offering programs within the community so that they can stay out of the prison system and not move into it as an adult. So we need to be looking at this same sort of approach with our adult population as well. I think it's important to remember to focus on the fact that also one of our largest growing populations are women, and not only them when they're in prison, then it's impacting their families as well. So I'm all for other ways of addressing that, and that would be with education, with early childhood programs that allow families to learn how to parent so that they can they can be their child's first teacher, and that they can address these issues early. And that's the one way that we will also affect our population, our prison population as well.
Thank you so much, Pat. We really appreciate your response. Jeff Pittman, talk to us about your thoughts about our increasing prison populations and what you would do differently.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I sit on the Public Safety Budget Committee. We've met continuously year after year, and I've taken a great interest in corrections here because of so many prisons in the Northeast Kansas area. And, you know, they're projecting our prisons to be at near 28,000 in 2028, and we've constantly increased criminal penalties over the years, and without attacking recidivism, without cutting down the number of nonviolent offenders in prison, it's just going to continue to rise, and that's expensive. And we had years of, mismanagement of the correction systems, and I've focused on helping out my prison workers, my correction staff, get raises. But now I'm on the NAACP. I'm the chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee here in Leavenworth, Lansing, on the NAACP, and it's about looking at alternatives. How do we get people out and stop committing the crimes? How do we educate them and educate them into the workforce? How do we deal with some of the mental issues and addictions? We've added nearly $1 million last year on my committee to the Senate Bill 123 bill that looks at how do we help get people off of those addictive drugs. With that said, I also support decriminalization of marijuana, especially medical marijuana. We've got this as a high degree, Schedule I drug at the federal level. We really should address that. We can do more here locally. I voted to introduce medical marijuana here, and I think it's an alternative. It's going on all around us. We need to look at that and say, why are we sending so many people to jail, and often people of color disproportionately? It's not just. And we need to do better from the sentencing. We got to look at diversion. We got to look at ways to ease the transition out and look at good behavior and these types of things. So appreciate the question.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate your response. Kevin Braun, give us your thoughts about this prison question.
Thank you so much, Potter, for that question. Well, the first thing we have to do is we know that we've got to keep Kansans safe, right? So we can't just open the doors and say, oh, anybody who did a crime or did some crime is just automatically going to go free. That doesn't make any sense, right? So we want to make sure that we do things that are smart. And actually, it's not a service to the people. When I look at this, I mean, I did a vote for increase for corrections because I'm the subcommittee for corrections. I did things where we had people with hepatitis. We voted for extra money to make sure to manage that issue in the prisons. When I look at someone who's addicted to drugs or has a problem, when I say when they get incarcerated, I want to make sure that we take the time after they go in, whether you come at this from a standpoint of Christianity or you come at it from a standpoint of logic, 95% of these people are going to come back out and they're going to be your neighbor. And so we need to make sure that whenever they come in, we immediately put them on a track. It's a correction facility, that we put them on a track to correction. I understand some people may be frustrated that a crime has been committed against them and someone gets out early. But I do believe in doing things with good behavior. I do believe, though, we have to give them a pathway. Whatever they were missing when they went in, we've got to have it when they get out. One of the awesome things here in Wyandotte County is the juvenile corrections area where Don Ash, our sheriff, had just done an amazing job. He separated out the juveniles so that there wasn't the challenges that there were there, and that they don't become criminals. It gives them an opportunity to get those lessons that come out. So I also sat with Governor Kelly in Leavenworth. I was the only legislator to do so. And I sat with her and we talked about how we would have work programs. And I believe in work programs in all of our correctional facilities. So the 95% of people that when they come out, they will be able to move into society, keeping society safe, staying employed, and feeling the joy that's possible with a good life. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your response. David Haley, talk to us about the prison system.
Indeed, it is frustrating, as has been mentioned, that despite best efforts, we continue to see our prison population rise. We've got close to 10,000, about 10,500 in our system. It got so bad that we had to farm some out, if you will, to other states where it's equally expensive to house our offenders. As was mentioned, I sit on the Kansas Sentencing Commission, and we've struggled for years and will be presenting once again to the legislature what we call, in conjunction with the Criminal Justice Reform Commission, which was recently impaneled, to look at the low-hanging fruit. In other words, what's obvious for where we can find reform that will free up our bed space and to keep bed space for those who are truly a threat or to themselves or who need to, or to others and who need to be incarcerated. So for the low-level drug crime, and let me say that I, David Haley, have been the only legislator to consistently introduce medicinal marijuana bills over the course of the last 11 years. Others have come on board now, and when we look at 68% of America now having access to medicinal marijuana, some who still believe in prohibition, that it's some demon drug that requires incarceration, need to really kind of, I think, hopefully reevaluate their position. But as the sponsor of that legislation, and frankly, I don't want to decriminalize marijuana. I'd like to see legalization so that we can join many others. But what that would do for our bed space is to free up beds for those who are truly a threat to our society. And the Criminal Justice Reform Commission will be looking at presumptive probation for first-time possession crimes of marijuana where there's no violence involved. That would be as much as 900 beds in the Kansas system that could be used to truly house those that need it. Finally, Senate Bill 123, which I was a part of, and I think about 15 years ago, was a model that emphasizes treatment over incarceration. So I thank you.
All right, I'm gonna have to cut you off on that note. We do have one final question, and I think this impacts everyone on the call. So we have seen a great amount of unrest as it relates to how racism has impacted our communities within all of our states and indeed this entire country. What can you do as a legislator to make sure that there is equal protection under the law and not overreaching by law enforcement? David Haley, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I certainly have been very concerned for many years that Kansas has really not been as responsive to some legislation that I've introduced and that won't get a hearing. I'll mention a few right quick. One has been that all police departments and law enforcement have body cameras. It's something that we should not have to rely as a society to have citizens' cell phones record instances that are out of kilter. It's for the protection, not only for the citizenry, but of law enforcement, who are often accused erroneously of conduct that everyone would agree they should not have been accused of. So my body camera legislation. And then the other has been, let's enhance hate crimes. So Kansas does not have a hate crime sentencing right now. We have to go to the feds when someone in Johnson County is accosted at the Jewish Community Center, or when someone rushes into a bar and says, "Get out of my country," and starts shooting. We have to get a federal hate crime, because Kansas has not acted on the bill that I've consistently introduced that enhances that sentencing. In terms of racial and other data collection for traffic stops, as Missouri has, that points to those hot spots, those pockets in Kansas where people are being pulled over because they are perhaps bringing marijuana from Colorado, driving through Kansas and being detained. And we need to have that data to show that it is disproportionately impacting people of color who are Black, who are brown, and who are broke, as we've heard our district attorneys say here in Wyandotte County. So I think I've been at the forefront of trying to address some of the issues that brings a more race-neutral society to Kansas. And I hope that we are more synthesized now that our sensitivities have been due to sad national events, that we will be more responsive, despite the fact that Kansas is what, 8% Black, 9% Black, and about 8 or 9% brown.
Thank you so much. Kevin Braun, talk to us how you feel about this question of injustice and law enforcement and how the two can come together.
Okay. Well, there is no question that there are some people in our society that do have a predisposition where they do not understand that the races are equal. There's no question about that. And I think and when we look at that, we have to say that that is not the majority of the people. That's not America. That's not the majority. When I look at this issue, for me personally, I was kind of spoiled because I spent 32 years in the military. And when I had to do 20 push-ups, the guy next to me or the girl next to me had to do 20 push-ups too. And it didn't matter what your race was, what your gender was, it just didn't have any impact. And so I understand these issues from a standpoint of, we have biracial people in my family. And I understand that when people look at you differently, and I've experienced that. However, when we look at laws, we do have to follow a baseline law. I go back to saying whether it's a Christian approach or whether it is an approach that is logic, we have to help people get out of poverty. And the way to do that is not just to allow program after program after program. We've got to have a better education system. I say this all the time, and although Northeast Wyandotte is not in my district, and I've said this to David Haley, if we fix Northeast Wyandotte, if we fix the problems, the economic problems there, and the family problems there, we can change the whole state. And so as a person, I think we're blessed in Wyandotte County. We've got a great sheriff's department, a great police department. My friend that I served with in Iraq and served with in the National Guard, David Melton, was shot and killed. The reaction to that could have been that the police went the other direction, but they didn't. They maintained their cool and they did the right thing. And we're blessed here in Kansas and in Wyandotte County to have that. So I will embrace on racial issues anytime. I've held a forum in regard to diversity just this summer. And I look forward to working with everybody on this call to move us forward to a safer and better Wyandotte and Leavenworth County. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your response. Jeff Pittman, give us your thoughts on social injustice and law enforcement and where they come together.
Absolutely. And I mentioned that I was on the NAACP Criminal Justice Reform Committee here. And, you know, I differ in my opinion. I don't think you can look at a predominantly Black community and say, fix the family and we'll fix justice. I just differ on that. I don't think that's effective. I think when Senator Haley had mentioned body cams protect the officers, it protects the people in the incidents. And officers I know, they recognize that, you know, they don't like it when they see things like George Floyd incident. They don't agree with it. They think the officer was way out of line, obviously, and they don't want that to be stereotyped on them. That might be why I've got their endorsement at the FOP in Wyandotte. But I've also worked with my community here. We mentioned I was only this, I was only that. I mean, I did work with Governor Kelly, I will say, on things like criminal justice reform inside the prisons. We formed a Unity in the Community Walk. I was one of the only legislators to participate, even though there were open invitations. Police came, walked side by side with minority members, with white people in the community, with all members of the community, and expressed the outrage as well as the willingness to work together towards solutions in our community here. I think that community policing programs work. I think diversity training works. I think we need to look at sentencing guidelines and really look at metrics and numbers that say who's getting stopped where, also who's getting convicted and who's not. How do we fix those injustices where we don't fund you know, those folks who don't have enough money to defend themselves in the courts? How do we fix the programs that work for certain classes of people but not others? We need to do more here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your response. Pat Pettey? Give us your thoughts, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Well, I think this is really an issue that doesn't go away, and it's just been exacerbated this year by actions that we've seen across the country. I really believe that most people that are in law enforcement are there because they want to serve their communities, and they're there for the right reasons. So I think that's important to always keep in mind. It was mentioned earlier about body cameras. I think body cameras are real important because if you don't have a body camera, somebody else is taking a picture. It's just that we are a world of cameras now, and that's not going to change. So the other thing we have to keep in mind with the police, I think, with law enforcement, is that they have a lot of times they're called out not because of a problem with the law, but a social problem. So many of our police officers now become social workers. And I think that that's something that has to be looked at and addressed. And I'm not sure it necessarily can be done at the state level, but at local levels as well. What I'm hearing from our police is that they are responsive, but what I'm hearing from minority communities is that they feel that they're often being that, like I have a young lady that's working on my campaign, and she was making the comment about, hey, it looks like there's a policeman in every corner in her neighborhood, but not necessarily in some other neighborhoods. So there has to be a belief that there's equal enforcement, no matter where you live in our community. So I think that's important, and I do believe we have to work together to make those changes.
Thank you so much, Pat. Diana Whittington, your thoughts on social injustice, law enforcement, and how they come together.
Okay, well, I do support our police, our law enforcement, and I am totally for justice and against injustice. I was talking to a gentleman the other day, a neighbor who he said that his kids, I mean, he happens to be a Black gentleman, and his kids are biracial, and he said his kids are afraid of police. And he's like, why don't we have the police in the community like we used to, coming into schools and talking to the kids like they used to. And he was from Alabama, I believe, and so he's new to the area. And I feel like we do a pretty good job of community with our police officers being in the community and presenting the positive side of trying to build relationships with each other. And so I think we need to just continue doing that, is really looking at what we have in common and how we can work together. We don't want our little ones afraid of police. And so I'm hoping that this gentleman, like I said, he moved here about 6 months ago, that the experience that his kids will come to understand that the police officers are there to protect and serve, and that they are able to change that mindset.
Thank you so much. Lindsey, final word on social injustice and law enforcement.
I, as a senator and currently as a city council member, I approach issues with a consideration for racial justice. On the city council, I have been supportive of community engagement officers that do just what Ms. Whittington was speaking about. They're in the communities, they are in the schools, they're building relationships. I think that's really important, and we've seen it be successful on a city level. We also have mandatory de-escalation training and other opportunities just for continued conversations and an openness to listening. One of the things I have been pleased about is our police chief being willing to open up, listen, what are the ways that we can do this better? How can we keep our community safe with that consideration for racial justice? So as a council member, I have advocated for that and really encouraged that along. Second, in my work with Climate Action KC, we're really focused on how we can solve some of the environmental inequality evident throughout the region. We did a climate risk and vulnerability assessment for our 10-county region and found that communities of color are at a higher risk due to heat islands and poor air quality. So we're looking at ways that we can improve the environmental factors and therefore improve quality of life, implementing solutions like tree restoration to reduce temperatures, energy and water efficiency kits to save people money, addressing access to fresh produce to improve health outcomes, making sure that people have access to transportation so they can get to work. I think those are important things to consider as well. So just how are our communities organized in a way that addresses that environmental justice as well?
Awesome. Thank you so much for your response. And again, thank each of the candidates for your time tonight. I also want to thank again our sponsors, the Baptist Ministers Union, Collaborative Communications, Dot Votes, the Kansas City, Kansas Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, the KCK NAAC branch, the League of Women Voters, Mainstream Coalition, and Servicing Lips. I also, again, want to come back to our candidates for your final responses. Each of you will be given 1 minute to give your closing response. And again, thank from District 4, David Haley, from Senate District 5, Kevin Braun, Jeff Pittman, Senate District 6, Pat Pettey and Diana Whittington, and Senate District 10, Lindsey Constance. So Lindsey, we'll start you off with your final 1 minute closing.
All right, thank you so much. As a senator, I will use the same approach I use in the classroom, as a teacher, as a city council member, and as president and co-founder of Climate Action KC. I face problems head on and have a track record of building coalitions and finding solutions using facts and data to guide my decisions. As a working mom and a teacher with 17 years of experience, I understand the challenges facing my neighbors, and I will lead with compassion and common sense at the heart of everything I do. I got into this race because I want to create a brighter future for Kansas kids, and we do that by keeping our schools safe and fully funded, increasing access to affordable health care, investing in infrastructure and broadband, and revitalizing our economy by helping businesses get back to work. Our community deserves a senator who will show up and try to find common ground even when we don't agree. Our state is no stranger to big problems, and neither am I. I am ready to get to work and move Kansas forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. And again, after you do your final closing, you are free to log off or stay on to have your final comment. So David Haley, since you are up, we'll go ahead and let you give your final 1 minute, sir.
Okay, well, you threw me out of sync a little bit. I'm glad to get my 1 minute. Thank you, Broderick Crawford, and thank you to the sponsors this evening. I don't know that we've had many opportunities to have such forums like this. Certainly, this is the first I've participated in, and with very little time left to get our messages out. I am energized by this forum and by each of you who are taking time to know a little bit more about where we stand and what we represent. Again, I'm David Haley. I represent Wyandotte County. All of my boundaries are in Wyandotte County. I have the most diverse district of the 40 Senate districts. And as always, the issues of criminal justice reform, of education, and of health, general health, are at the forefront, reducing our tax burden. And so I hope to go back and to continue that stride. And I hope that the members of your coalition that are formed here today will evaluate from the very top at the presidential all the way to precinct committee level, energize that vote and get it out that we might have addressed the issues that truly mean the most to all Kansans.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to Kevin Braun, your final 1 minute closing, sir.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm applying to be rehired. I want to be your state senator again in Senate District 5. And the reason you need to do that is because I am the only majority party member in the whole Wyandotte contingent. There's 10 members and only one of them can be a committee chair. Only one of them can carry a bill. Only one of them has the influence to take the other 2/3 of the bodies and actually pass legislation that matters to Wyandotte County. Wyandotte County, whether you believe it or not, is hungry for that. I'm willing to work across the aisle with everybody who comes and says, I've got important things to do for Wyandotte and Leavenworth County. I'm the only one that can do that. Unless you just want someone who can vote no and block. And we see what's happened to Wyandotte County because of that. I'll work with anybody to improve Wyandotte and Leavenworth County. So with that, I've delivered results. $50 million match plans with the transportation plan, $50,000 for veteran service organizations. Safety net clinics, $2 million. Nobody's ever delivered like that. And I look to deliver like that for the next 4 years. I would appreciate your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your responses and participation. Jeff Pittman, your final 1 minute closing, sir.
All right, thank you. You know, it's such a pleasure to be here. This mainstream organization pushes for, you know, all Kansans to be given the same opportunity, the same dignity, the same respect for their beliefs as other Kansans. And it was founded by Republicans and Democrats that have come together. In my tenure, I've helped secure raises for teachers and corrections officers. I've supported healthcare options like Medicaid expansion. And I've worked as a true bipartisan working across the aisle. I've carried bills on the floor because in the House, we believed that it's fine to have minority and majority parties carrying bills and proposing these things. And amendments after amendments, we've worked on legislation as a group of politicians, of public servants working to make a better Kansas. We're in another crisis. It'll require level-headed leaders like myself to balance our economic return in a safe way, somebody who understands how education affects their family and how we and this region can move forward economically with good education and safely in the next coming years.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your final closing. We'll go to Diana Whittington now for your 1 minute closing.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Crawford, and to all the sponsors for this opportunity. It's great to see all these faces and get to know and listen. I neglected to say before, I am an art teacher and have been for many years, and also an artist. And I think we get kind of a stigma. People think we're kind of crazy and weird sometimes, but I think we do think a little differently. And sometimes that's needed to help solve problems, a new look at things, a new way to look at things. And so I am pretty good at working with people. And I like to de-escalate situations and look for win-win solutions in things. One of my favorite quotes is by Michelangelo, and it is, "I'm always learning." And I take that quote to heart because I am always learning every day. And I learned a lot tonight with this forum, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and your final response. Pat Pettey, you will be the final speaker for 1 minute for tonight's forum.
I'm the wrap-up guy? Okay. Well, I really want to thank Mainstream Coalition and all of the partners that are involved in this forum tonight. It has been very informative. I think it is important to remember that we are being elected by, we are asking for the votes of Kansans, and I'm asking for the votes of the people in the 6th district to re-elect me. But I have to keep in mind that this is a very, very turbulent time. And I think that Kansans are mad about how their lives have been turned upside down. And they're scared about the uncertainty of jobs and health and going back to school, and how no matter who you talk to, everything's a little bit different. So we need to work on calming those fears. We need to work on putting more compassion into our decisions and collaboration as we work with others. And we need to concentrate on that, because I think it's very important that we work for a calmer environment, that we're within Kansas, and that we rely on supporting those things that are so important. Education, we've got to support our schools, and health, and that's going to help to rebuild our economic stability in Kansas. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That is time for tonight. To each of the candidates that are still here, thank you for joining us tonight. This is Broderick Crawford of the NBC Community Development Corporation and Servicing LIPS. Again, thanking you, both the candidates who participated tonight and also all of our viewers. We thank you for joining us for this Senate Candidate Forum. Thank you and have a good night.